Good afternoon, morning, evening, nighttime, whenever you're watching this. My name is Angela, middle initial K, last name Durden, and I'm here today as the publisher, founder uh, of Blue Room Books. That's blueroombooks.com. Um, you can see it scrolling across the bottom of the screen, so you don't have to remember it. It'll be there. The subject today that I wanted to get into is authors, editors, and readers. As anybody who reads books, watches movies, listens to music, anything, views art, everybody, their brains assimilate it completely differently. What they get out of it is their own experience. And how they get that experience, only God knows, because He's the one that invented brains. Now, or the mind, plus your individual life experiences are going to come into play as to how you process the information. You may read things that you don't have a clue what they are, so you may have to stop and look it up, or you just may have to say, maybe they'll explain it later, whatever. But what I wanted to do today, along that line of authors, editors, and readers, is to share some of my experience as a reader before I was ever thinking of writing a book, before I ever became a publisher, before I ever began editing other people's stuff. I had immersed myself in a massive amount of books. I have a wall in my living room that is full of books. Somebody once stood back and looked at all these books and said, "Have you read all those books?" I said, "Well, most of them. Some of them are just for me to be able to have information to look up, reference type things. Uh, so I haven't read everything in those books, but pretty much everything else, yeah." And the person was, well, they didn't know what to think about it. I don't think they'd ever seen that many books in a person's home before. What I didn't tell them, because I was afraid it was going to blow their ever loving little mind, was that I had just gone through all of this and gotten rid of a lot of things that I knew I was never going to read again. And no need keeping them and collecting dust. And that I had done that purge, that purchase, read, purge, let's see, the last 40 years, maybe 20 times, because that's how much I read. It, it, the place that I live in now would not hold all the books that I have ever read or had. Now, this is not me being braggadocious. This is me just saying, I like to read good writing. And of course, there's those books you buy sometimes and they're not what you thought they were going to be. So you don't waste your time. Although I usually do try to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of slog through it a little more. But there's a lot of good writers out there. There are a lot of good writers. Not all of them are known by everybody or even a majority of people. And I run across people today who are my age who have never heard of John Le Carre. Now, if you're sitting there going, "Who's John Le Carre?" and then you're one of those people. And yet he was one of the most prolific authors in the history of the world. And if you've ever watched the movie, any of the movie adaptations or BBC adaptations, serialized, of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, that was John Le Carre. The Tailor of Panama, that was John Le Carre. Smiley's People, that was John Le Carre. He's got, what, 30 something books? Maybe more. And yet there's still people who've never heard of him, ever. Some people who've never, I've mentioned those movies before to people to say who he was. They still didn't know. So if you're an author and you're thinking everybody should know your name, well, that's just unrealistic. Everybody will not know your name. Everybody may not read your book. And if your book is ever put into movie form, many people may not ever watch it, want to watch it, even know it exists. That's the realities. Now, I want to talk about John le Carré. Let me move this stack of books right here because I am going to talk to y'all a little bit about, dadgummit, didn't slide over the way I wanted it to. I want to talk to y'all a little bit about, you know what, I'm making a blasted big mess here. Let me pick this up again. Sheesh. I just purchased the biography of John le Carré. I've read some of the things that he's written about his life. I've read some other things that people have written, and very interesting. He writes a lot about the spy world and how it works. And he invented a world of his own based upon his own experience. And there's this one book he wrote called A Perfect Spy. And I read that book and I said, man, this sounds great. I really enjoyed it. Come to find out, as I'm reading his biography by Adam Sisman, that pretty much A Perfect Spy, the main character's backstory was his story growing up. So he took some personal things that happened to him, found a way to work them into this story, that from which the main character, who is the boy, grows up and becomes the perfect spy. It was made into a movie. Well done. BBC. Gosh, I've watched that several times. Just great. But as I was looking at his biography and I saw pictures of himself and his father at the ages of the people in this movie, that somebody picked out people that were almost duplicates of them. Couldn't tell the difference. And it made me really sad because the character in A Perfect Spy, the main character, he's so lost. He's just lost. And he doesn't want to be lost. So he becomes the spy, and there he's got his family. And that turns out not so good, and I'm not going to spoil it from you. Wonderful book. Wonderful, serialized by the BBC. It was great. But one thing I wanted to point out to you about John le Carré is that he has several editors through the years, and his American editor was a guy by the name of Bob Gottlieb. Now, Bob died in 2023 when he was 92 years old. He had a huge successful career as an author, editor, editorial development, magazines, all this sort of thing. But here's what he had to say about writers. He said, I don't think writers need all that sympathy. They need to be told when their books are bad. Oh my gosh. They need to be told when their books are bad. Now, I have been saying for so many years now, as a publisher. And because of being a publisher, I'm also being an editor, because I have to make sure that the imprint that I put on a book, my imprint, Blue Room Books, meets the standards of what my company wants to do. So I'm not going to take your word for it if you pitch a book to me that you've had it professionally edited. I'm going to go through it. And there's a really good reason. I've had people bring me books that said they were professionally edited by whoever, doesn't matter, and who knows if they have been or not. That when I dive into them, I go, oh no, no. There's no way I'm gonna put my imprint on this book. And that's the purpose of a publisher, is to keep the quality up. So I have said, well, my real job is keeping bad books out of the world. And they may be bad, not for all kinds of reasons. And just because a book is bad doesn't mean someone isn't doing excellent writing. There's other things that make a book bad. The writing may be brilliant, but maybe the plot line is so convoluted and thick and doesn't make sense that the reader's just not going to get it. You see, there's a lot of reasons that makes a book unfit to be published under an imprint of a third party. Now, you as the author may want to publish it yourself. More power to you. But as a publisher, my job, all publishers' jobs, and even editors' jobs, is to find out what is wrong with it, what is going to tick people off, and not tick them off because they don't like the plot or they don't like the character. That's an opinion of the story itself, of how they're interacting with that character. No. The job is that a publisher and an editor, their job is to make the writer be the best they can be, and then some. Now, some people may be saying, oh, Angela, what do you know about it? You're the editor and you're the publisher and you just get off on telling people that they're not good or whatever. No. Let me tell you, the first novel I ever wrote had some excellent writing in it. But it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. I recognized it, thank goodness. And I never let anybody read it because it was that bad. I worked on that thing for over 10 years. 10 years. And I could not find out what was wrong with it. I tried all kinds of different things. I even tried writing it from a third person omniscient narrator instead of first person. It didn't work. Though the basis of the story would have made it would have been great with somebody else writing it. But I couldn't do it. I tried everything. And let me tell you something. That book has never seen the light of day. Furthermore, it is now destroyed. My hard copies are destroyed where I had printed it out so I could read it line by line, and the digital copy is gone. That's how bad it was. Further, I've worked with editors. Y'all may have heard me mention Tom Whitfield. He's my editor-in-chief here at Blue Room Books, but I met him because I hired him as an editor some years back for a project for me and 3 other people. We were working on a book, what's called a multi-author book. It was nonfiction, it was business. And he was recommended to me. Now, here I am working on another book, and it was my memoir. And it was a tough read. That's all I'm going to say. But you see, Tom, he took the emotion out of it for his read. He didn't get into the emotional parts of the story where he would sympathize with the character, the little girl that was Angela, you see. He didn't do that. No emotion. He read what was on the page. And he found quite a lot. Now, because I was so close to my own memoir, mind you, this is my life. What does he know about it? Well, he didn't know anything about it. And yet he found problems with it. And next thing I know, we're sitting in front of a computer and he's telling me, look, he's having to walk me through this because I was so caught up in what I had written and trying to figure out my own life that I missed some really excellent points about editing and writing and storytelling. He points these things out. And there was times I'm sitting in front of the computer and I'm crying, tears, snot, everything. And he just keeps handing me stuff to wipe away tears and blow my nose and all that sort of thing. And then I'd say, it can't be done the way you want. What? And he'd just sit there and let me get through all my crying. And he'd say, okay, look, let me explain. And he would try to explain. Well, I would say, I'll just have to come back and look at this. Or I would say, okay, well, when you say it that way, I understand. Now I know what needs to be done. Now his fix and my fix may have been different, but it accomplished the same thing. Now his fix, because it wasn't his story, he really didn't know the ins and outs of it. He was just looking at how it was written on the page. Would have worked perfectly fine for a nonfiction kind of, a business type of story, but this wasn't a business type of story. It was a memoir, and it was a tough memoir. So my fix was different, though it accomplished the same thing. And when I would tell him my fix, he would go, now that would work. And other times I would tell him my fix and he'd say, no, it's still not right. And so I would cry. And I wasn't crying because he told me I needed to work on it. I was crying because I was reliving all of this stuff. And as I relived it and having to answer his question as I relived it was very difficult. Now, some of you authors out there, you writers, y'all may be going through the same thing. You may be trying to write a novel that fictionalizes your life. That happens a lot. A lot of people try to work things out that way, and yet you're still caught up in it. And an editor comes along and says, this is not working. And you're like, well, that happened to me in real life. Well, real life and fiction are not the same thing. And how people read them are not the same way. So if an editor, such as Bob Gottlieb, says, your book is bad, yeah, you may cry, you may whine, but if they sit there staring at you with the hard eyes, going, yeah, whatever, know that they really, really want you to look good. They want you to look good. And they don't care what your feelings are, because who's going to read your book? Strangers, people that don't know you. And so you have to be able to tell that story in such a way that a stranger doesn't have to guess at a lot of different things. They have to be led through the story. Every now and then you can hold back some information, tell them later. Those are called cliffhangers or foreshadowing. Readers love cliffhangers and they love foreshadowing. Ooh, I wonder when that's going to show up in the story. But there's some things that just, well, you just need to, listen to the editor when the editor says, Even if the editor says, I don't know what it is yet, but I know there's something wrong. And the editor may have to take some time to think about it and to figure it out and then to put it into words. And then you need to listen. I've done it with all my books. It is a hard process. It isn't easy. But as an author, the question is, do you respect the reader? Do you respect the reader enough to make it good for them? Is it a good experience that they're having reading your book? Reading the words that you've chosen in the methodology in which you have chosen to put them. If you just think you can just dump 60,000 words, 20,000 words, 100,000 words, and never revisit that and think it's just going to flow, you don't respect the reader. You just don't. And I would hate to think that there's any author out there that disrespects readers. I would hate to think it, and yet I have had to think it because I've met a few of them. Well, I had one guy one time, he said, I just need your opinion on this thing I wrote. It was probably about, I don't know, 10,000 words. He said, I want you to be blunt. Tell me anything you find with it, anything. And this is the next thing that he said. He said, listen, my ego is not tied up in my words. So be truthful. I said, okay, I will. Took it home, read it. Met back up with him. Boy, did it have issues. And it was only 10,000 words. That's not a lot of words. And I wasn't through with the second thing. Then he snatched the papers from me because he'd given them to me in a hard fashion. He snatched the papers from me and he said, well, snit, snit, snit. I can't believe. Oh, you know, he was almost swooning with self-righteous indignation that somebody didn't love his work. I said, whoa, wait. When you gave this to me, you told me to be blunt, be brutal, because you wanted to make your piece better. Now, I said, I looked at it with that in mind, that you wanted it better. I didn't pick anything that didn't need working on. You said your ego wasn't tied up in it, and yet clearly your ego is tied up in it. Well, and out he walked. Trying to think where we met. A coffee shop, I think. Okay, if that's how you want to be. Well, never heard from him again. And I have had that process happen several times. One lady, I don't even know how she got a hold of me. This was years ago. Lived in, I want to say, Mississippi. And she was writing a book about, I really don't remember what it was about. It had something to do with, I think she was fictionalizing her childhood that was full of abuse. And then the growing up and being out on her own and having to deal with that. And there was some kind of revenge factor in it. I don't really know. But I'm reading this, and the story itself was great. It was wonderful. Except for one thing. Every sentence, almost entirely, had the word F-U in it. You know, see what I'm saying? And yet, as it wasn't shocking to me, I grew up with a lot of bad language around my house. But as a writer, because I was not yet an editor or a publisher at that time, as a writer, I understood the power of words. Words have power. They can either suck the power away from your story, or they can infuse the story with power. They can suck the emotion out, or they can put the emotion in, depending on how you use them. Well, this word F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F F. I thought, there's a reason she's using this, and it's obvious because she's trying to show anger, righteous indignation, whatever, and I identified all of that. But after all was said and done, there was only one place in that entire manuscript, only one place where that word needed to be used. And it was perfect. It was perfect right there. It was actually the what do they call that? A fulcrum, the pivot point, upon which the entire book was held together. She didn't even know it. She didn't plan it, because was used everywhere. So I said to her, look, if you take every one of those fuzz out and leave just this one in, your book is going to be powerful. Powerful. She absolutely had a meltdown. You can't tell me I can't use. I said, I didn't tell you couldn't. I said, it would be a heck of a lot better if you just left that one in there and took out the rest. I tried to explain it to her. She wouldn't have any of it. Thank goodness she lived in Mississippi and I was in Georgia, because, God only knows. She was furious. But I wasn't wrong. It's not the use of those words that's the problem. It's the overuse of those words that's the problem. It is the use of those words in places that the power is not it's not heightened or supported, but instead it's like a squirrel. A dog is laying there, squirrel. Why was I laying here? I don't know. It took the power away. It took the reader's attention away, all the way away from what was really going on. I hope she learned her lesson. I hope that somebody else told her this sort of thing, because I would hate it if the story was wonderful. It was wonderful. But too many F words, they call them F bombs for a reason, and bombs blow up things. Most of the time, things don't need to be blown up like that. So editors find these kinds of things. Let me put it this way. Good editors do. There are, of course, a lot of editors that don't. So anyway, John le Carré has written absolutely a wonderful amount of books with characters. Now, what I like about John le Carré's writing is that he doesn't have the same... Okay, if he has different characters, they speak differently. And if he's written in first person, he's written in third person. I think he had one book that was written in second person. I will have to confirm that, but my opinion at the time was that's what it was. I wish I'd written it down. But I like that his style of language fit the character. That's good, and it fit the situation. So that was John le Carré. Now, in 1977, maybe, my sister brought me a book. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It was called, it was by Jeffrey Archer. It was this book. Let's see. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Now, I said, well, what's it about? And she said, look, you just got to read it. You just got to read it. Now, my sister, number one, I did not know that she read books. I never saw her holding one. And yet here she had read this novel by Jeffrey Archer. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Let me see here. Did I make a note about Jeffrey Archer? No, I was going to see if I had looked to see if he was still alive or dead. I wrote him a few years back and told him, I said, I told him the story about my sister giving me the book and that I read it and that it was still on my bookshelf. Well, I thought it was on my bookshelf, forgot it was my sister's book and I had given it back, so I went out and bought me a copy. You may thank me later, Mr. Archer, or your publisher may. Let's see, who is your publisher? St. Martin's Paperbacks is the one I got of this one. What I liked about that was that it was a tale of financial revenge. Awesome story. So if you're looking for books, thrift books and some other places, probably even in your neighborhood, there's used bookstores. Call them. See if they have some of these older books because they're not politically correct. They use language in awesome ways without having to worry about whose feelings are going to be hurt. And that's what you need. You need stories where human nature is front and center and accurate to human nature without worrying about somebody coming down your throat and hollering about it. So that is Jeffrey Archer. Now, I met a man some years back with my first published book called 9 Stupid Things People Do to Mess Up Their Resumes and 16 Ways to Avoid the Traps. And I was looking for somebody to blurb the book. And I had written several letters to people. And one of the people that I wrote it to was a guy by the name of Joseph Garber. Joseph R. Garber. He passed away in 2005. So sad. And how I knew about him was he wrote for Forbes magazine on technology, I think, or it's been a long time ago. But I loved his writing. Just in that one-page thing that was a regular column that he had, I loved his writing. So I sent him a letter. Didn't know he was an author. Never heard of him. See? That's how it works. And he declined to blurb my book, not because he didn't like it, because he said, man, this is a great book, but because he was no longer in the headhunting business. And he said, there's somebody in Atlanta who is in the headhunting business. Let me put you in contact with her. She and I worked together for years. She still has a name. She's still doing that. And so that's what we did. But he told me, he said, we weren't talking, we were emailing. He says, I've written a book called Vertical Run, and I went to the used bookstore and got it because that was all that was near me at the time. I read it. Oh my God, it was great. And he also wrote another one called In a Perfect State, and it's how do you get out of a country like, I think was it Singapore? Yeah. Red-eyed and jet-lagged, an American businessman arrives in Singapore from Manhattan, unaware that he has been marked for assassination. A world away in New York, he was Jack Taft, Vice President, Logistics, LB Tech, Inc., a small cog on the mighty wheel of international industry, a decent company man, an ordinary man, and no hero. But now, in the Big Brother utopia of Singapore, he's suddenly become a fugitive, pursued by police, whose orders read shoot to kill. Now, how he came up with this idea was that he asked himself, Singapore was this authoritarian state. It was you can go to prison for spitting your gum out on the sidewalk. He said, what if an American male, white American male, found himself on the run in Singapore? How would he hide? It's not he can blend into the crowd. Nobody looks like him. And with that premise, he came up with this book. He also wrote Vertical Run, which was Die Hard, only better. Before Die Hard was a thing, it was optioned. Shenanigans in Hollywood. In a Perfect State. There we go. But the thing is, he also wrote Rascal Money and where did I put those notes? Rascal Money, and in 1989, Vertical Run 95, In a Perfect State 99, and Whirlwind in 2004. He was working on his 5th novel when he passed away of a heart attack. Now, what did I like about his stuff? I liked it that he found situations that he would say, what if this and that meet? How would I get out of it? Very, very good stuff. So Joseph Garber, again, used bookstores are great for finding this. Thriftbooks.com may have some of them. I don't know. In case anybody fusses about me saying thrift books, this is not me getting paid to mention them. I use them all the time. Now, another one was Agatha Christie. I am not going to go into her. There's so much available to tell her story that I'm not even going to do it. But I will tell you, two of her characters were my most favorite. Hercule Poirot, played by, and then on the TV version was David Suchet. Brilliant, brilliant. And the character Jane Marshall. And the best Jane Marshall on the screen was Joan Hickson. Everybody else just wasn't. Not when held up to her. Not that they did horrible jobs. People liked them. But the very first Jane Marple I ever saw on screen was Joan, and she became, in my mind, when I read the books, that's who it is. And when I try to put these other characters, other actors, actresses into that role, it doesn't fit. It has to do with the physicality of how Joan Hickson saw a spinster lady, and it was accurate. So Agatha Christie, excellent stuff. But you know what? There was a lot of stuff she wrote that never saw the light of day. And she was still writing on stuff and going, nah, it's not going to work. Blah. So she was doing a ton of self-editing beforehand. And she also took characters and let them have their own way of speaking. Everybody did not speak the same way, which is, of course, very good. Now, Michael Connelly, he's written a lot of different things, and honestly, I've not read them all. But I will tell you that the series version of his Bosch series of books is better than the books themselves. And that is very difficult for me to say because I usually always like the book better. Not that his writing is terrible. It's not that. It's just that whoever wrote the screenplays and then had to set the scene up, and the camera work made it all come alive for me, and I really liked it. Michael Connelly is still working on stuff. He's executive producer of some of these things. Just has a lot of good characters speak. He allows them to speak as they need to, not all in the same kind of tone. And by speak, I mean kinds of words they say. And so Michael Connelly, he's also really good. Now, let's see, what's my last one? Oh, yeah. Frederick Forsyth. Now, I read some book by Frederick Forsyth when I was a teenager. I don't remember which one it was. I was blown away. You know, I didn't read. One time I tried reading one of these teenage stories where there's a girl and a boy and they're in high school, and she's a cheerleader, or she doesn't want to be a cheerleader, and she just hates cheerleaders, and yet she's a good girl. And then there's the teenage boy who he's a jock, or maybe he's not a jock. He doesn't want to be a jock, or whatever. Opposites attract. They get together, and they're trying to date, and there's all this teenage drama. Oh my God! I checked out one of those books from the school library. Couldn't even get all the way through it. This is just crap. Well, it was crap to me. But give me a good old a Frederick Forsyth book. That's when I came alive. I was 14, I think. I wish I knew what it was. I'm almost positive that it was the Devil's Alternative, but I don't think so. Let me see when the Devil's Alternative came out. Because, let's see when it came out. 1979? No, I was already married for that book, so it had to have been one before that. It was life, it was death, it was hard decisions, and that was actually the world in which I lived. I lived in a world of life and death and hard decisions, and I studied these things. How did they get out of it? How did they keep track of all the information? And I found that, okay, I'm starting to do the same. I've been doing the same thing in my childhood. But then I got a hold of, I think I found this book. This is the book. I think I found it at a yard sale. Do not quote me on that, but I'm almost positive that I did. It was written in 1971. I found it when I think my son was maybe 2 years old. So that would have been in 1984-ish. Day of the Jackal. This book has stayed on my shelf since then. Every purge, it never gets purged, ever. And the reason is I think this was his best book ever. I've read several of his. I've read The Devil's Alternative. I've read Avenger, The Fist of God. Oh my God, it's great. But his absolute best book, The Day of the Jackal. Now, Frederick Forsyth, he died this year, 2025. Sad, sad, sad. There has not been any movie made of this book that even comes close. The only one that kind of sort of comes a little bit close is the movie made in 65. It had Edward Fox as the Jackal, which he did a good job. But that obviously there were some things in this book that could not be put on screen or even hinted at in 1965 when the movie was made. Master of setting that scene so well that you're there. You are there. And when I saw the movie with Edward Fox, because it was so close in time to when the book was written, the same types of cars mentioned were in the movie, the same ways of traveling, of going through checkpoints, all of that was the same. So in my mind, it most closely matched the book. But I think there was one with Richard Gere. Is it Richard Gere? There was another one that was done. They were horrible. 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 And maybe none will ever be good. Not good enough for what was in this book and what I saw in my mind, because Frederick Forsyth painted with words. He just painted with words. It was awesome. Now, another movie, it's called The Eye of the Needle. It was a adaptation of the book by Ken Follett. Now, Ken Follett, man, he's a good writer too. He's not a Frederick Forsyth, but really good. The movie was Donald Sutherland and Kate Nelligan, and it was set in World War II. Nazis and the Allies and the Axis and all that sort of thing, and all the drama that was surrounding that, and how it's all brought to one small little island off the coast of I don't know, Wales or Scotland or somewhere. And a man and a woman live on this island, and a sheep herder, cow herder, old man on the other side of the island. It's not a big island. And who washes up but Donald Sutherland, who is a Nazi trying to get away with some really good secrets to tell Hitler so that he can win the war. That's all I'm going to say. The movie was good, but here is where people who read are going to love what's on the page, because there's so much more detail in the book about situations than can ever be put on the screen. And I will just leave that to you to understand it. Ken Follett, though, excellent. Now, why am I mentioning all of these people? I'll tell you. It's because they all had publishers, they all had editors, and they probably had editors as good as Gottlieb. What was his name? Let's see what his name was again. Bob Gottlieb, John le Carré's editor, who said, "I don't think writers need all that sympathy. They need to be told when their books are bad." Now, why would he say something like that? Because he was in the business of selling books. And if you think of books as a product, now you can see why you really need to put out the best product that you've got. And the thing is that no two books are the same. So each book as a product stands alone. But there's other kinds of product beside it. So when someone goes to the store to pick out a book and they see John le Carré against Ken Follett or a Frederick Forsyth or a Michael Connelly, depending on, or somebody else, who would they most likely pick? Because they don't want to waste their money. They don't want to waste their money. They definitely don't want to waste their time reading a bad book. And by bad, I mean badly written, badly edited, badly formatted even. How does it look on the page? So all of these people had editors. There was book designers involved. There were publishers involved. Now, granted, the publishing business has completely changed. We know this, that are in the business know it. More and more authors are starting to find out about that. Even the Michael Connellys of this world, they don't do the same style of business that they did 20, 30 years ago. They just don't. It's changed that much. And technology is part of that. Still, they have editors, they have designers, they have publishers, all working together to bring the product to market. So when you hire an editor and you hire a book designer, neither one gets carte blanche. Neither one. You should all work together. Because after all, it is your story. But they need to figure out a way to catch the eyeballs, see. How are they going to get the public to even look twice at the cover? You know, some books have been released with different covers in different markets to see which one worked. And sometimes none of them did. Sometimes it took a while to find the thing that caught the public's attention. It's not as easy as just feeling creative and I'm going to write this story and it's just so wonderful because I feel so creative that everybody's going to love it. No, that's not how it works. Well, I think I'm going to let y'all go. I have a stack of stuff I need to put up here. I've been putting this together. See all my notes that I've been writing. Well, maybe you can't see the notes. I don't know if you can see them. Yeah. And I'm glad that y'all could join me. I'm Angela, middle initial K, last name Durden. Now my name that I write under for my fiction is Durden Kell, Durden, last name Kell, Kell, which is my maiden name. That's the name my daddy gave me. So, thank you for joining me. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed diving into for readers. Hope you enjoyed diving into the business of words and you know how they catch your attention. Leave any comments that you might want below if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube and you see this, you know how to leave a message. All righty, we'll see you guys later. Bye bye.